She was 7 years old the first time she understood what her father truly thought of her, not from a shout, not from a slap, from a sentence so quiet, so casual it was almost kind. Her little brother Marcus had just announced at the dinner table that he wanted to be an engineer when he grew up. And their father, Richard Calloway, had leaned back in his chair, chest wide with pride, and said, "That's my boy. That's exactly what this family needs." Then he looked at her, at little Maya, sitting across the table with a science book in her lap, and he smiled. Not a warm smile, a dismissive one. The kind that tells you, without a single word, that you are already categorized, already decided. "Maya," he said, "you worry about being sweet. That's enough for a girl." She didn't cry. She was 7. She didn't even fully understand what had just happened to her. But something inside her went very, very still. Maya Calloway grew up in a house where love came with conditions. Her father wasn't a monster. That's the part that made it so complicated. He worked 2 jobs to keep the lights on. He showed up to Marcus's baseball games without fail. He bought Maya dresses she never asked for and called it generosity. But every time Maya brought home a perfect report card, Richard would glance at it, nod once, and say, "Good. Keep your grades up so you can find a good husband someday." Every time. Not once, not a single time in her entire childhood, did he say, "Maya, you could be something great." Because in Richard Calloway's mind, she couldn't. She was a girl, and in his world that was a ceiling, not just a starting point. Her mother, Diane, was softer, more careful. She would squeeze Maya's hand under the dinner table when Richard said things like that. A silent apology that changed absolutely nothing. Diane loved her husband. She also loved her daughter. She just never had the courage to love them both out loud at the same time. So Maya learned to be quiet. She learned to wait. She learned to take every dismissal, every small humiliation, every "that's not for girls," and fold it carefully into a pocket somewhere deep inside her chest. She kept it there. She kept all of it there. By the time Maya was 16, she'd already decided what she was going to do with her life. She just hadn't told anyone yet. She was in the school library, the one place that felt like hers, when she stumbled across a book on molecular biology. She didn't expect to love it. She expected it to be difficult and dry. Instead, she sat in that plastic chair for 3 hours straight, completely lost in the science of how cells divide, how they replicate, how a single error in a strand of DNA can change an entire life. Her teacher, Mrs. Fletcher, found her there just before closing time. "You know," Mrs. Fletcher said gently, looking over Maya's shoulder at the open pages, "I have a friend who runs a summer research program at the university. She looks for students exactly like you." Maya looked up. Students like me? Students who forget to eat because they're too busy reading. It was the first time in Maya's life that an adult had looked at her love of science, not as a curiosity or a quirk, but as a gift. She almost cried in that library. She didn't, but it was close. She applied for the program without telling her father. She told him she was volunteering at a community center. She told her mother the truth, late at night in the kitchen, whispering over cups of tea. Diane listened. Diane looked afraid. And then Diane reached across the table and pressed 2 folded $20 bills into Maya's hand. "For the bus fare," she said. "Don't tell your father?" That was the most radical thing Diane Calloway ever did for her daughter. And Maya never forgot it. The summer program changed her. She worked alongside graduate students who were measuring protein folding patterns. She pipetted samples with shaking hands and then, within a week, with steady ones. She asked questions that her supervisors actually paused to think about before answering. And at the end of the summer, the program director, Dr. Simone Hayes, pulled her aside. "Maya," she said, "I want you to think seriously about what comes after high school. Really think about it. Not what your family wants, what you want." No one had ever said that to her before. "What do you want?" She drove home that evening and sat in the driveway for 15 minutes before going inside. Because inside was her father, and her father had already decided for her. Senior year arrived like a clock ticking down to something inevitable. College application season began. Marcus, 2 years younger, wouldn't need to worry about it for a while, but already Richard was talking about Marcus's future the way he talked about investments. With interest, with planning, with care. For Maya, the conversation was different. One October evening, Richard called her into the living room. He had a newspaper folded in his lap. He looked like a man who had rehearsed this. "I've been thinking," he said, "about after graduation. There is a medical receptionist training program downtown, 12 weeks. Good pay, steady work." Maya sat very still. "I was thinking about college, Dad." He tilted his head. "College is expensive, Maya." "I know. I've been applying for scholarships." Something shifted in his face, not anger. Something more condescending than anger, patience. The kind of patience you offer someone who doesn't understand something simple. "Listen to me," he said. "College is for people who need credentials. You're going to get married, have children. That's not a criticism. That's just life. Why rack up debt for a degree you'll never use?" There it was, plain as a slap, soft as a dismissal. Maya looked at her father for a long moment. She didn't argue. She didn't cry. She just nodded slowly, stood up, and walked back to her room. And that night, she submitted 7 college applications. She got into 5 of them. She told no one except her mother. Diane read the acceptance letters one by one at the kitchen table, her hands trembling slightly, her eyes going wet. She looked up at her daughter and said the thing she had been too afraid to say for 17 years. "I'm proud of you, baby. I am so proud of you." Maya accepted a full scholarship to Hargrove University, a science and research school 4 hours away, full tuition. Housing stipend, everything covered. She had done it completely on her own. The morning she was supposed to leave, she finally told her father. She had packed her bags. They were by the front door. She stood in the kitchen while Richard drank his morning coffee, and she said, "I'm leaving for college today. Dad, full scholarship, I won't cost you anything." The silence that followed was unlike any silence she had ever heard in that house. Richard set down his cup. He looked at the bags by the door. He looked at Maya, and then he said something she would carry inside her for the next 8 years. "You're going to come crawling back. Girls like you always do." She picked up her bags. She kissed her mother on the cheek. She walked out the door. She did not look back. She didn't come back for Thanksgiving that year, or Christmas. She called her mother every Sunday. They talked for exactly as long as Richard was at home. College was hard in a way no one had prepared her for. Not intellectually. Maya devoured the coursework. She thrived in the labs. She had a gift for research that her professors noticed within the first semester. It was hard in the quiet moments. In the dormitory late at night, when she could hear other students calling their parents to share good news, she would sit on her bed and feel a specific kind of loneliness that doesn't have a clean name. She missed the idea of a father who was proud of her. She had never had that father, but she still missed him. She channeled it into work. She channeled it into everything. By her sophomore year, she was co-authoring a research paper with her faculty advisor. By junior year, she had her name on 2 published studies in a peer-reviewed journal. By the time she graduated with her bachelor's degree, summa cum laude, top of her class, her father had missed every milestone. He didn't know about any of them. She came home for her mother's birthday that spring. It was the first time she'd been back in 2 years. Richard was in the backyard when she arrived. She could hear him through the screen door talking to a neighbor about Marcus, who had just gotten into a state school. Richard's voice was bright with pride, full and warm and completely unguarded. Maya stood in the kitchen with her mother and listened. "He worked so hard," Richard was saying. "That boy is going to do great things." Maya looked at her mother. Diane looked at the floor. "Mom," Maya said quietly, "does he ever ask about me?" Diane was quiet for a moment. Too long a moment. "He asks if you're okay," she finally said. "He just doesn't know how to say what he actually means," Maya nodded. She'd gotten very good at nodding. She stayed for 3 days. Richard was polite, distant. He asked her how she was settling in, the way you ask a house guest you barely know. He did not ask about her studies. He did not ask what she was working on. He talked about the weather and the garden and Marcus, always Marcus. On the last night, as Maya was loading her bag into her car, Richard appeared on the porch. He stood there in the yellow light, hands in his pockets, looking like a man who had something to say and no idea how to say it. "Drive safe," he finally offered. She looked at him for a moment. "I always do, Dad." She drove 4 hours back to campus. She cried the whole first hour. Then she stopped. Then she opened her laptop and started working. That was the night she decided to pursue her doctorate. 8 years. That's how long it took. A bachelor's, a master's, and then the long, grinding, beautiful, brutal process of a PhD in molecular biology. She studied cellular regeneration and its role in cancer prevention. Her dissertation research would eventually contribute to a treatment pathway that a major research hospital would begin testing within 2 years of her graduation. She won 3 fellowships. She taught undergraduate labs. She failed an experiment so catastrophically in her 3rd year that she sat on the floor of the research facility at midnight and genuinely considered quitting. She didn't quit. She got up off the floor, cleaned up the samples, and redesigned the methodology from scratch. Her faculty advisor later called it the most impressive pivot she'd seen from a doctoral student in 15 years. During those 8 years, Maya came home exactly 4 times. For her mother's health scare, for her grandmother's funeral, for Marcus's wedding where she wore a blue dress and smiled in every photograph and did not tell a single person at that reception what her title was about to be. And each time she came home, Richard was the same, polite, surface level, proud of everything in that house, except the one thing sitting right across the dinner table from him. Marcus, to his credit, had grown. He'd gotten softer with age, more aware. He called Maya once, unprompted, just to tell her he thought what she was doing was incredible. It was awkward and genuine, and she had loved him fiercely for it. But Richard was a man who decided who his daughter was before she ever had the chance to show him. And in 2 weeks, Richard Calloway was throwing himself a retirement party, 32 years with the same company, a career he was proud of, a gathering of people who thought the world of him. He had invited Maya. She had RSVPD, yes. She had something she wanted to give him. The night before the party, Maya sat alone in her apartment and held her diploma in both hands. Doctor of Philosophy in Molecular Biology. Hargrove University, her name, printed in ink that felt heavier than it had any right to. She thought about the dinner table when she was 7. She thought about the word sweet. She thought about the morning she walked out the door with her bags while her father told her she'd come crawling back. She thought about every Sunday phone call with her mother that had to end the moment she heard his key in the lock. She thought about Mrs. Fletcher and Dr. Hayes, and the 2 folded 20s her mother pressed into her hand in the kitchen at midnight. She thought about how much she had wanted for so many years to simply hear her father say he was wrong. She set the diploma back in its case. She closed the lid. And she drove home. The drive home felt different this time. Every other time Maya Calloway had made that 4-hour drive, she'd felt something tightening in her chest as the miles passed. Something that sat between dread and longing. The particular anxiety of someone returning to a place where they were never fully seen. This time she felt calm. Not the brittle calm of someone holding themselves together. Real calm. The kind that settles in when you have finally stopped waiting for something and started doing something instead. She arrived the evening before the party. Her mother opened the door before she even knocked. Diane Calloway had aged in the way that women who have carried too much for too long tend to age. There were lines around her eyes that hadn't been there a few years ago. Her hair was more silver now than brown. But her eyes, when she saw Maya, went young again. Lit up from somewhere inside. "Baby," she said, and pulled her into a hug so tight it felt like an apology for every time she hadn't been brave enough. Maya held her and breathed. "Is he home?" she asked quietly. "He's in the garage," Diane said. She pulled back and looked at Maya's face with the careful attention of a woman who has spent decades reading rooms. "Are you okay?" "I'm better than okay, Mom." Diane glanced down at the document case Maya was carrying. She looked back up. "Is that—" "Yes," Maya said. Diane's chin trembled once, just once. Then she pressed her lips together and nodded with the dignity of a woman who has waited a very long time for something that was always coming. "Come inside," she said. "I made your favorite." Dinner that night was quiet in the way all significant nights tend to be. Richard sat at the head of the table, talking about the party, about who was coming, about the speech Marcus was going to make. He was in a good mood. The magnanimous, slightly self-congratulatory good mood of a man who believed he had earned his moment. Maya sat across from him and listened. She ate her mother's cooking and answered the surface questions he asked and felt, for the first time in her adult life, entirely unafraid of him. He had no idea. That was the thing she kept coming back to. He had built his whole understanding of who she was on the foundation of a decision he made when she was 7 years old. And he had never once thought to check if he was right. She looked at him over the table. This man who had called her sweet. This man who had offered her a 12-week receptionist course and thought he was being practical. This man who had stood on a lit porch and, with everything he could have said, chose to drive safe. She felt something she hadn't expected to feel. She felt sorry for him. Not in a way that's soft in what she was going to do, but in the way you feel sorry for someone who has spent 30 years walking past a window without ever once looking out. He had missed so much. The party was held at the community hall downtown. The same one Maya noted privately that she had pretended to volunteer at when she was 17. The room was full. Richard had a lot of colleagues. A lot of neighbors. People who genuinely liked him, and Maya held that carefully, because she didn't want to reduce her father to a villain. He was complicated. He was genuinely loved by people in that room. He was also genuinely wrong about one very important thing. She sat near the back for the first half of the evening. She watched. She greeted people she vaguely remembered from childhood. She smiled. She was gracious. She let the evening build around her like water rising. Marcus found her during cocktail hour. He gave her a real hug, the kind brothers learn to give when they finally understand their sisters. He looked at the case in her hand. "Is that what I think it is?" he asked. "Probably," she said. He stared at her for a second. Then he shook his head slowly, and there was something in his expression that was part amazement and part grief. "Maya, I had no idea. I mean, I knew you were doing your PhD, but I didn't realize that I finished it. Why didn't you say anything?" She looked at him gently. "Because I wanted to say it here." Marcus was quiet. He looked across the room at their father, who was laughing with an old colleague, his hand raised in a wide, expansive gesture, completely in his element. "He's going to lose it." "I know," Maya said. "I know," Maya said. "That's not actually the point." Marcus looked back at her. He seemed to understand something in that moment. He nodded slowly. "I'll get Mom," he said. "She should be close to you when it happens."